Okay, so now we've really covered virtually all the material up to the highest path and fruition. But now there's just two additional topics that remain. These are treated in the manual in the section called the Analysis of Attainments. I have it on page 363. And first, before we actually look at the text, it needs a little explanation. Now, earlier when I was explaining the process of attainment of the four stages, I'm going to stand. I explained that each of the noble disciples, they go through stages of path and fruition experience, and then they come back to the level of ordinary consciousness, but this time as a noble disciple of a particular level. Now it might seem that all of that hard work and you just get one mind moment of path, 2 or 3 mind moments of fruition, which pass by so quickly that you're hardly aware of it, and not much else. You don't get much else out of it. So after years of hard work, I might feel cheated. But actually, fruition occurs in 2 ways. There is the fruition that occurs immediately after the path. In that case, the fruition occurs just as 2 or 3 cheetahs immediately after the path. But a person who has gone through the path and fruition of a particular level then has regular access to that fruition as a meditative attainment that they can enter at will. So when one becomes, let's start with the stream enterer. Okay, one goes through the path of stream entry, followed by 2 or 3 moments of the fruit of stream entry. But now, as a stream enterer, if one wishes, with a little effort along the prescribed route, one can enter into what is called the Phala Samapatti, the meditative attainment of the fruit. In that case, one doesn't go again through the path attainment, because the path only occurs once. Each path only occurs once, but one will go directly into the fruition as a meditative absorption. And in that fruition, it is a jhanic attainment, but it is not like the ordinary jhana. The ordinary jhana takes something like a nimitta, like the counterpart sign as its object. But this is a meditative attainment in which one is absorbed in the experience of nibbana for an extended duration of time. It can be that one wants to go into the fruition for an hour, one will remain in fruition for an hour, experiencing the peace and bliss of nibbana for 1 hour. For 3 hours, it's said that some meditators can even do it like all day or several days, sitting absorbed in that fruition attainment. So that is to clarify the way the word fruition is used. So there's the fruition that occurs in immediate succession to the path, in that case, the fruit is only 2 or 3 mind moments, followed by emergence from the fruit. And then there is fruition that occurs as a meditative attainment, in which case it's an absorption in the fruit. And in that case, the citas can continue uninterruptedly, without any break, one after another in the fruition attainment for an extended period of time. Okay, so now we can look at the analysis of attainments. And when questions come up in your mind, you can write them down, and then we can take the afternoon session is entirely devoted to questions, no lecture in that period. Okay, so here I'm coming back now to the manual, the analysis of attainments. And so it says, herein the attainment of fruition is common to all, each being able to attain their respective fruition. But the attainment of cessation, which we're going to come to next, is accessible only to non-returners in arhats. Okay, then comes some explanation in the guide. The attainment of fruition, and here the Pali word is phala samapatti. Phala, of course, is the fruition. And by the way, the PH in Pali, it's not pronounced like the F, like in phone, but it's pronounced like a P, but with a little puff of the breath, a little aspiration, phala. And then samapatti means a meditative attainment. So this is the attainment of fruition, is a meditative attainment by which a noble disciple enters into supramundane absorption. That's the meditative absorption with nibbana as object. It is attained for the purpose of experiencing the bliss of nibbana here and now, and the citas that occur in this attainment are the fruition citas corresponding to the disciple's level of realization. Thus, each of the 4 grades of noble individuals can enter their own proper fruition attainment. So a stream enterer enters the fruition attainment of stream entry, the once returner enters the fruition attainment of once returning, the non-returner enters the fruition attainment of non-returning, and the arahat enters the fruition attainment of arhatship. Okay, the attainment is reached by first making the resolution to attain fruition, and then developing in sequence the insight knowledges, beginning with knowledge of rise and fall. Okay, now we can look at the Visuddhimagga passage, which gives some fuller explanations. Okay, so it takes the attainment of fruition. So what is fruition attainment? It is absorption in the cessation, or absorption in the nibbanic experience. Okay, so who attains it? So ordinary persons, people who don't have any level of who don't have any of the 4 path attainments cannot attain fruition because it is beyond their reach. But all noble ones attain fruition or can attain it because it is within their reach. But those who have reached a higher path do not attain a lower fruition. So if one reaches the path of, one has gone through the path and fruit of non-returning, then one doesn't make a determination, let me enter the fruit of stream entry. Because one has access to the fruition that corresponds to the path one has attained. Okay, and those who have reached a lower path do not attain a higher fruition because it's beyond their reach. If I'm a stream enterer and I make the wish, may I enter the fruition of the non-returner, or may I enter the fruit, attain the fruition of arhatship. Just a little bit, I won't ask for more, just let me experience it. 3 seconds will be enough, then I'll come out. No, you can't do it because it's beyond your reach. If you're a stream enterer and you want to experience the fruit of arhatship, the fruition, attainment of arhatship, you have to continue practicing your insight till you become once returner, non-returner, arhat. Then you can experience the fruit of arhatship. Please, just 3 seconds. No. Okay, but each one attains the appropriate fruition. And so why do they attain it? In order to dwell in this noble, supramundane or world-transcending bliss here and now. Okay, so this is how does its attainment come about? Actually, for 2 reasons. These are not really reasons, but 2 ways in which it comes about. 2 which are interdependent. One is by not bringing to mind any object other than Nibbana, and by bringing Nibbana to mind, which is not very informative, but what comes next is more informative. This is the process of attaining the fruition. So the noble disciple who seeks the attainment of fruition should go into solitary retreat. Then he or she, of course, any noble disciple can achieve this, should see formations, the conditioned phenomena with insight, starting from rise and fall. And then it progresses as far then it progresses as far as change of lineage knowledge with formations as its object. But the change of lineage here is not actually affecting a change of lineage. It's just the citta that occurs in that sequence. Okay, and then immediately next to it, consciousness becomes absorbed in Nibbana with the attainment of fruition. And here it is only fruition, not path, that arises even in a trainer, because the intention is fruition attainment. That is, in this case, the disciple wants to enter into fruition. They're not intending to strive for a higher path. And so their resolution is, let me enter into fruition, and then they take up the development of insight knowledge with that intention at the back of their mind. And so because that is their intention, when they pass through equanimity of formations and then conformity, change of lineage, then the mind will enter into fruition with Nibbana as the object of realization. It won't go to the path. If the intention, when one goes into retreat and takes up the practice of insight, if the intention, the purpose, is to reach the next path, then one starts from knowledge of rise and fall, aiming for the next path. Then one won't enter fruition, because the intention, the guiding purpose of that practice is to reach the next higher path. So if one's faculties are not strong enough to reach the next higher path, Then one will go up to equanimity about formations, and then one will just stop there and continue there without reaching either the higher path or without reaching fruition. But in this case, we're taking the disciple who wants to enter the attainment of fruition. Okay, so how is it made to last, to endure? Okay, it is made to last in three ways. Not attending to any signs. Any signs here means to the features of any conditioned phenomena. Turning the attention to the signless element. The signless element is nibbana. And the prior volition. Actually, the decisive factor here is the prior volition. Since not attending to any signs, turning the attention to nibbana, that is common to all attainments of fruition, but it doesn't determine the time duration itself, but it's the prior volition. So the prior volition is the predetermining of the time before attaining. So one determines thus, I shall remain in fruition for such and such a time, half an hour, 2 hours, and then I shall emerge at such a time. And then it will last according to the predetermined time. And then, without having anybody having to come and ring a bell, without peeking to see what the clock shows, just automatically, when the predetermined time lapses, one emerges. Okay, then how does the emergence come about? One emerges in two ways: by attending to some sign, some conditioned phenomena. That's the features of any of the five aggregates, and not attending to the signless element. So this is based on, I think it's Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 43. What comes next to fruition? This gets a little complicated. Maybe we don't need all of this detail. I'm going to skip over this. Gets into too much scholastic niceties of distinguishing, this and that. You'll have access to this file when I make it available to everyone. Then you can look at that paragraph. Okay, next comes something which is called, we already had it mentioned in the manual, so we'll turn back to the manual. This is known in the suttas, it is called Sanya Vedaita Nirodha, which means the cessation of perception and feeling. In the commentaries, it comes to be called simply Nirodha Samapatti, the attainment of cessation, the meditative attainment of cessation. And we saw in the passage that we read that the attainment of cessation is accessible only to non-returners and arahats. So typically it's an attainment of arahats, but we see in the suttas that there are some passages where non-returners attain it. And it's not accessible only to monastics, but there are some passages which speak of lay disciples who are non-returners who can attain this attainment of cessation. I believe it was one called Chitta the householder. He has a chapter of his own in Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 41. He speaks about attaining it. And there are several others. Okay, so first we look at the description in the manual. This is section 43. Actually, it's pretty concise in the manual. It's, I think, better to look at the Visuddhimagga passage. Okay, so first we have the definition. What is the attainment of cessation? This is the non-occurrence of consciousness and mental factors owing to their progressive cessation. That is, in the process of attaining cessation, one is going to go into successively more subtle stages of attainment until one reaches that point where the flow of consciousness, of mind, along with its mental factors, comes to complete cessation. Okay, so who attains it and who do not attain it? So, ordinary people, stream enterers, once returners, non-returners, and arhats who are bare insight meditators do not attain it. So the only ones who attain it are non-returners and arhats who gain the 8 meditative attainments, the 8 previous meditative attainments. That is the 4 jhanas and the 4 arupas, the 4 formless meditations. So one has to be able to attain all of those 8 attainments and to have mastery over them. Okay, so how does one attain it? So it's describing the attainment by way of the bhikkhu, but as I said, it's not confined to a monk or to a nun, but there are accounts of some lay disciples who attained cessation. But here it uses the bhikkhu as the model. Okay, so he wishes to attain cessation, he finishes his meal, washes his hands and feet, and so on. Then he sits down in a well-prepared seat in a secluded place, because in this during this attainment, one doesn't want to be disturbed. So one crosses the legs, sets the body erect, establishes mindfulness, and then one attains the first jhana. Then one emerges and one contemplates the factors within that jhana by way of insight as impermanent, I don't like painful, dukkha, and not self. Okay, after contemplating them with insight, then one attains the second jhana, one emerges, and then again one contemplates its constituents, the material and mental factors there, with insight, again as impermanent, dukkha, and not self. And then one does the same with the third jhana, the fourth, into the base of boundless space, to the base of boundless consciousness. On emerging, one sees with its constituents with insight. And then one attains the base consisting of nothingness. Then one emerges from the base of nothingness, and then one does what's called the fourfold preparatory task, the fourfold preparation. This is in the case of a monastic. So one makes the determination first that during the attainment there won't be any damage to anything in one's possession that is the property of others. It's said that when one is in cessation, if any sort of calamity takes place, one's own robe and bowl will not be damaged. And there's a canonical story that comes to illustrate this. It's a during the time of some previous Buddha, he had a disciple, one of his chief disciples, who had entered into cessation. And he was sitting in cessation, and then some villagers came across him in the woods, sitting in cessation, and they saw like no sign of breathing. So they thought, it's a dead monk, so we'd better cremate him. And so they made a cremation pyre, and they put the body there and set it on fire. But because the monk was in cessation, no damage, no harm could come to his body or to his robe. And so the villagers set the cremation pyre on fire and then left. Then the fire burns, and it burns down, and it goes out. And then after a few days, this monk comes out of his attainment of cessation, and his robe is intact, his alms bowl is probably still with him, and he looks around and wonders, what's happened? But if one has property on one's belongings of others with one, then one has to make this determination, may no damage come to those items. And then it's said that it's sort of like a mystical phenomenon, that by the force of that determination, the items that belong to others will not be damaged. Okay, then the next determination it's called briefly business of the Sangha. That is, if one belongs to a monastic community and your presence is needed when they're having a meeting, but you're off in cessation, so they all need you. So they're we're wondering, where is Bhante Sujiva? Oh, he's out in that little patch of woods in meditation. Oh, but we need him. Then just automatically, when that need arises amongst the Sangha, again, it's a little bit like a mystical phenomena, that the monk in cessation will automatically come out so that he can participate in the Sangha gathering because his presence is needed. And then the third is called the call from the Buddha, a summons from the Buddha. Of course, this applies only at the time when the Buddha is alive. So if the Buddha is calling a meeting of the Sangha, or he wants this particular monk, so if the Buddha thinks, I want that monk, I have to speak to him, then automatically the monk will come out from cessation and know that the Buddha is calling me. So those three will bring about, or these two will bring about automatic emergence from cessation. But this fourth is the determination of the duration of the attainment. So one predetermines how long I will remain in cessation. It can be, again, half hour, an hour. I think it said it can go up to 7 days. Okay, so now he's gone through the base of nothingness. He's emerged from it. He does what's called the fourfold preparation. Now, having completed the preparation, he next attains the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception. So this is the fourth formless meditation. It's like the subtlest state of consciousness possible within the whole hierarchy or spectrum of consciousness. And then the consciousness will run just for 2 turns. The mind will remain for 2 turns within the cessation, within neither perception nor non-perception. And then consciousness stops and one is in cessation. And then how is it made to last? It lasts as long as the predetermined time, unless it's interrupted by the exhaustion of the lifespan. That is, if one's life is due to come to an end during the cessation, then one will emerge from the cessation attainment and then go into the death process. Or else, if there's some Sangha meeting where one is needed, one will come out. Or else, if the Buddha wants to call you, you'll come out. Okay, so how does the emergence from it come about? The emergence comes about in two ways. The principle is the same. Okay, by means of the fruition of non-return in the case of the non-returner. That is, if one is a non-returner and one enters into cessation, then when one is about to emerge, or when one emerges, the first citta that arises is the fruit of non-return. So one experiences that fruition, I think it's for just one mind moment. If one is an arahat, then the fruit of arhatship, citta, arises. I think it's just one occasion. And then the mind falls into the life continuum. Yeah, so we have, if you go back to the manual, we have section 44, which says, at the time of emergence from cessation, in the case of a non-returner, the fruit of non-returning consciousness occurs one time. In the case of the arahat, the fruit of arhatship consciousness also occurs one time, and then there is the drop into the life continuum, and then following this, the reviewing knowledge occurs. Okay, so that takes us through the attainment of cessation. Then comes the conclusion of this whole chapter of the compendium of meditation subjects. This is paragraph 45. So it just says, one who aspires to enjoy the taste of practice in the Buddha's dispensation should develop this twofold meditation. That's the meditation of samatha and vipassana, calm and insight, so excellent in the way explained. And so that takes us to the end of the compendium of meditation subjects. And that really is the conclusion of everything I intended to cover. So I think we have about 10 minutes we could take questions that arise out of this immediate topic now. And any questions that cover any questions that relate to anything covered during this retreat we started Friday evening up to today, then reserve those for the afternoon session. Okay, Mano has first crack, then Ivy.
Thank you, Bhante. Is there a concept of samatha and vipassana jhana and samatha and vipassana samadhi? When we think about the Eightfold Path, it seems as though you can follow the path from a samatha bhavana perspective and achieve the jhanas, but also following the vipassana bhavana, you can also achieve some form of jhana as well. Do you differentiate the two?
strictly in sutta usage, or in traditional usage, jhana, the word jhana, or the concept of jhana, refers to stages in the development of samatha, not in the stages of vipassana. But as I explained the other day, as one is developing, if one takes the practice or the path of dry insight, or bare insight, and one is developing intensive mindfulness, moment by moment mindfulness, it can lead to this momentary concentration in which the mind is concentrated as if in absorption. Though strictly that's not jhana. Strictly jhana is a form of samatha, or it results from samatha practice. But I should add that in recent times, the Burmese meditation master U Pandita Soyador, I think this appears in the book called In This Very Life, maybe in other works of his, he uses the expression, the vipassana jhanas, in order to indicate that in the higher stages of vipassana meditation, the mind becomes so concentrated that the degree of concentration corresponds to that of the jhanas in the samatha practice. But if we stay with sutta usage, which I prefer to do, we should keep the word, or let's more than sutta usage, if we stick with the traditional usage, the word jhana, it's predominantly stages reached through samatha meditation, except when we speak about the lokutara jhana, the world transcending jhanas, which are the paths and fruits.
And is that the same for samadhi? Because you mentioned, I think a couple of days ago, there is no concept of mindfulness explicitly stated in the Visuddhimagga, if I heard you correctly. Mindfulness and samadhi, the four foundations of mindfulness, are they mentioned explicitly in the Visuddhimagga, and are they connected directly to Vipassana Bhavana as well?
I'm not quite sure. I think you're asking several questions here. It's better express the question clearly and simply. Ask one question.
I'm trying to differentiate whether there is a concept of Vipassana Samadhi and Samatha Samadhi as well.
Okay, there is Vipassana Samadhi. That is the samadhi, a concentration that develops through Vipassana practice. But if we stick to conventional usage, we won't call that Vipassana jhana. We can call it Vipassana Samadhi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pandey. And I want to confirm my understanding whether it's correct. So for a person to attain arahant, the person cannot just go straight to arahantship. That person has to go through the stream enterer, non-return, step by step.
Okay, that's a good question. I think maybe two ways to look at this. If we take we call it the micro perspective, the microscopic perspective, we would say that the person has to go through each path and fruit in order to reach arhatship. But we see in the suttas, there are some cases where, say, the Buddha is giving a discourse, and then it said, as those monks were listening, they all achieved arhatship right on the spot.
Right.
It doesn't mention that they first achieved stream entry, then became once returner, then became non-returner. So what we would understand here is that they went through these four stages in such quick succession that the three previous attainments were insignificant. What was only significant was the attainment of arhatship.
Right, okay.
And so, let's see, You know, the case I mentioned, the two cases I mentioned the other day, that of the monk, or he actually didn't become ordained as a monk, he was an ascetic Bahya who came to the Buddha very anxious. Then the Buddha spoke that very short statement, in the scene, there should be only the scene. And then it says, right on the spot, his mind was freed from the asavas, from the taints. So it says that, right on the spot he achieved arhatship, but probably he went like boom, 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 right through the three previous paths and fruits, and then into arhatship.
Okay. And also because you mentioned that they need to attain the path, the fruit, and also they need to review the defilements.
Yeah.
So can I say a person who achieved, let's say, stream enterer, that person should know he or she attained stream enterer.
Yeah.
He or she doesn't need to go to another person and ask, am I a stream enterer or am I a non-returner? It shouldn't be in that way, right?
It seems it should be that way, but I think it's very possible for a person to be mistaken about their attainment. Like somebody can have what we call an extraordinary experience in meditation, and then think, this must be the path and fruit, so I must be the stream enterer or a once returner. So they can be mistaken about their attainment.
Okay.
I think that's quite possible.
Okay. And
In fact, I knew a monk back in Sri Lanka who would give indications that, well, when I practiced under that teacher, I reached the first path, and then I completed the second and third path under this teacher. But his behavior was such that occasionally other monks would say to him, from your behavior, we don't get the impression that you've reached the stage of non-returner. And he would say, how dare you challenge me? Who are you? What have you attained?
Okay, got it. And the last question, the insight meditation, if we finish our insight meditation, because I know concentration, we can still lose it. But for insight knowledge, can we also lose it? I mean, if we don't keep practicing, are we going to lose it?
Let us say that the ability to arouse those insight knowledges, if one doesn't keep up the practice, the ability to enter into that. You see, what we call the insight knowledge is not only something that one knows, like a fact, like knowing particular facts, but it's an experiential state in which one is experiencing something happening, like in what's called knowledge of rise and fall. It's not just that one knows that phenomena arise and pass away, but one is actually in that state experiencing the arising and falling of phenomena. Or in knowledge of dissolution, bhanganyana, it's not just that one knows that phenomena break up and perish, but one is actually experiencing, in quick succession, this breaking up and dissolving of phenomena. So if one is not keeping up that regular practice, or generally even I would say, probably for most people, even to maintain those insight knowledges, one has to be in a situation of intensive practice, like a retreat situation. Even in day-to-day practice, if one is doing hour morning, hour in the evening practice, one might not be able to bring up those full insight knowledges. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit analogous to the jhana. Like if one just does an hour, of course somebody who has mastered the jhana could then enter into it at any occasion. Maybe somebody who really masters those insight knowledges can just turn the mind to them and then come into them at once. But if one just goes through them, say, a few times, and then comes out and then doesn't maintain that intensity of practice, then it's difficult to bring them up.
Okay.
Though, say one slacks off the practice for some time, and then if one enters into intensive practice again, it takes some effort, but those insight knowledges will then come more easily than if one has never experienced them before and is starting from scratch.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your teaching.
Thank you. And, okay, it's getting to be lunchtime, so we'll take your question if it's an easy one. I mean, if it's one that can be answered easily.
I don't think it's an easy one, so...
You could ask it. If it's difficult, I'll ask you to keep it for the afternoon.
Okay. My question is about when Buddha reached Nibbana.
Yeah.
It is different from what we talk about today to reach the Arahant Nibbana.
When he reached enlightenment, you mean?
Yeah, when Buddha reached the enlightenment. Because...
I mean under the Bodhi tree,
Yeah.
not the Nibbana as the passing away.
Oh, no, I mean the Nibbana when he passing away.
When he passed away, okay.
Because when we now talk about Buddha, he's the knower of the world, and we feel he's still with us.
Yeah.
But for arahantship, there's no existence. I just feel just the...
Okay, I think
No.
maybe keep that question for the afternoon.
Okay, yeah, I think that's...
Okay, because I think the gong is going to sound in 30 seconds. That's the wooden fish with now the gong. Okay, so we'll end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. Oh, one thing before we end. If there was anyone who wanted to do this, who hasn't done the 3 refuges and wants to do it, as I said, we could do it this afternoon. I'll leave this paper here, and you can write your name. Does anybody have a clean piece of paper? A blank piece of paper? Don't tear up out of a notebook like that. Okay, this is good. I'll put it here, and you can write your name here. And then we could do the ceremony. It just takes about 10 minutes when everything is done. And also I want to remind you, there are folders or brochures about Buddhist Global Relief in the back. And please pick one up and remember the Walk to Feed the Hungry. The New York walk is October 29th. And the Connecticut walk is November 6th. And I put out the catalogs from Wisdom Publications. Did they all go? Anybody wanted that didn't get? Wow. I have about 4 more here. I'll put them out on the table so you could pick them up. If you want, but you didn't get, you just write to Wisdom Publications and ask them to send the catalog. I'm sorry. Okay, so let us end with 3 bows to the Buddha.